What happens when your worst fear becomes your reality? Hi, I'm Brent Cassidy. Welcome to the Nightmare Success In and Out podcast, where we explore how to overcome your fears and nightmares and set yourself free. We're going to be exploring this topic with guys I was in Leavenworth with and others who survived their own nightmare. These stories can be inspiring, sometimes sad. There's some humor, but hopefully you can come away with a nugget of something that'll help you knock down some of the prisons you built up in your own mind. All right, welcome back, Nightmare Success listeners. This is where you come find out what happens when your worst fear becomes your reality. How do you adapt, survive, overcome? And I always just feel like a lucky guy that gets to sit in the chair and hear these stories because they inspire me. And I got to say, Jeff Grant has been such a great guy for me to know. He runs and founded the Progressive Prison Ministries, and we all get on there on a national call every Monday night, and it's always interesting because it's people who've gone through similar but different stories. And my guest, Charlie, I hope I don't mess up the back. Naselsky, is that right? Can I say it right? Okay, that's good.
Perfect.
I'm good at messing up names. I know faces, but I can always mess up a good name. I think I inherited that. But Charlie was he was on the other night and actually was one of the guys that led the topic, and I was so taken by his just authenticity and being vulnerable was his topic, and it brought out so much discussion. And I think it's one of those things that as a society, if we talked a little bit more about that as far as vulnerability, how that creates authenticity and creates strong relationships. But I think one of the really interesting things that I can't wait to get into with Charlie is that he got out of prison. He's one of the rare people that went through the whole process, and he went to trial. He got sentenced and went through the whole deal and appealed and all the things that went along with that. And that's, he's in the 1% that does that. But he was an attorney, and he had a choice to make at a certain point. And, he had pride in that he had been an attorney, he had worked in it. His kids were both doctors and attorneys, and that had been a source of pride within the family. Charlie decided to go after that. And I went through and read all this motion that went through the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. And man, what an excruciating process to go through. But I am so proud of Charlie and how he did that. I want to talk about that as far as what it takes to do something that you really want to do. And I'm sure his kids are proud of it. It's just, anyway, I can't wait to jump into all this. I'm really excited to have Charlie on as a guest. But before we do all that, I want to recognize our show sponsor, Auto Plaza Direct. Who likes spending a couple of weekends walking car lots looking for a car? Then you spend 4 or 5 hours in the dealership to buy a car. It's kind of like a trip to the dentist. And I've got some friends that are dentists. I really like you guys, Eddie, Logan out there. It's just, the idea of going to the dentist. Well, there's a better way to take away all that pain and hassle getting a car. Auto Plaza Direct. They're your personal car concierge. Just tell them the car you want, what you can pay, and they'll go find that car for you, negotiate your best price, and deliver that car to you. They also offer you warranties and financing. It's all full service. Go to autoplazadirect.com to get started with your personal car concierge. The new hassle-free way, the car buying experience you deserve. Auto Plaza Direct. Tell them that Brent from Nightmare Success sent you. Charlie, welcome in.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you for being here today. We, Charlie and I just kind of had an interesting conversation before we ever got on here. But what we didn't talk about, Charlie, because I know so much about you by reading your motion with the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. Let's let everybody get a chance to know you a little bit about coming back into this thing as far as Charlie as a kid, Charlie growing up, Charlie's mom and dad, siblings. What was life for you like as a kid growing up?
Well, first, Brent, thank you for having me. Having met you through Jeff's organization, and now having listened to several dozen of your 100+ podcast
I
series,
appreciate that.
I think I have an appreciation of the work you're doing
Thank you.
and its importance, both from the participants' perspective, because they get to share and hopefully benefit others, and from the listener's perspective, so they have an idea of what's out there, what we all have experienced, including those who have not actually been through this system, because the felon is an individual that is really very, very unique in this country.
Yeah.
And most people don't have the time to understand what they've been through. They don't want to understand it. They can't understand it. But I think it's important at least we give them an opportunity if they're interested. So that's what I think you've done, and I applaud you for it.
Well, I appreciate that. And I should have known as an attorney, I just should have given you the floor, let you have your opening.
No. That's fine. It's fine. So you presented the first question is what was my childhood like? It's
well, yeah, because I
simple.
mean, there's no doubt, Charlie, I want to get into the meat and potatoes of because you've got so much. And the other thing I didn't mention and I should have because I had it written down, is when you got out of prison, and this is another thing I want to talk about because I think it's so important, you went deep into reentry on peer-to-peer mentoring, and it actually had real results. And I want to get into that because that's not actually that whole program you put together was working, and it's not now being done. Maybe it was because of COVID, whatever the case is, but I also want to talk to you about that because you sent me that, and I also got an opportunity to read that and see what great work was being done and the percentages that were going down. And I was so impressed with the fact that you got people to voluntarily go to that, because with RDAP, as some of you listening down in Costa Rica or the Cayman Islands, you might not know what that means, but it's a residential drug and alcohol program that's inside the prison, and you live in, a specified place, and you do it for 9 months, and you hopefully get a year off your prison sentence. And then after that, you also have follow-up. So what impressed me about that with your peer-to-peer mentoring is there's so many things with Halfway House and everything else that happens, but you were able to get those guys through a coaching, you called it coaching, and mentoring, and you got real participation out of it. So that's a whole nother thing. I had that written down as something I was wanting to bring up, but that's something we need to get into also.
No,
too,
we can certainly get into it. I would tell you that Charlie's early life, and teenage life, and most of his adult life is not very exciting. So the conversation won't last very long.
So I mean, was your childhood would you say it was a normal childhood? You had parents that were married? Siblings, what kind of neighborhood did you live in? What was your world like?
Yeah, it was as TV, drama as you could get. We mother, father, happily married, probably the poster parents for love and marriage. Hardworking, dedicated to their children. I have one sister. We grew up in suburbia, middle class. My father was an incredibly smart and hardworking individual. He came out of Korea and just went to work. And my mom was a teacher, and she dedicated her life to being a teacher. I was the ultimate rule follower. Whatever my parents told me to do, I basically did. I took no risks for most of my life. I just followed the normal path.
Was it a strict household, Charlie? When you said you were a rule follower, Dad works hard, Mom's a teacher. Was it a strict household you lived in?
No. I think they were incredibly successful at imparting on us basic moral principles,
Uh-huh.
conscious work ethics, and dedication so that you owned it without having them dictated to you. And my sister and I followed that path. My sister was she was more of an explorer. I was more of the academic,
Mm-hmm.
but we both went on very healthy paths, and followed the normal lead. You graduate high school, you go to college the next day. Graduate
Uh-huh.
college, and you go to graduate school the very next day. You
Right.
go to graduate school, you leave, and you get a job, and you get married. Life cycle.
Uh-huh.
You wait a few years, you have a child. Wait a few years, you have another child. Everything's perfect.
So sounds like the plan was,
Well, yeah.
was the plan, Charlie, when you were in college, did you always know that you kind of wanted to get into law and be an attorney?
No. My family doesn't have a lot of professionals.
Mm-hmm.
In college, I actually made the decision that I would have science as my focus, and kind of that political science balance.
Yeah.
I did okay first year in science, and then I hit a brick wall, and chemistry just ruined me. So, ruined me.
The word chemistry scares me. So that
right. So once I veered off and found that chemistry was not something I could succeed in, I knew that I wasn't going to go through the schooling as a pre-med.
Yeah.
So I shifted, and the natural sequence of events was I focused on political science, and I did have certain science courses throughout. So I graduated with what I thought was a fairly, balanced academic experience.
Sure.
It wasn't simply reading, textbooks about world politics. And I felt good about it. And then I just applied to law school, went to law school. I did really well my first year of law school, so well that I was asked to join Law Review.
Wow.
Which is it's a fairly
you'd be at the top of your
unique
class
and
if
high
you do it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I was on Law Review, and I graduated law school and got a job immediately and just went to work. And so that was the normal path. And I shifted firms along the way in order to find one that I felt was most in line with my dreams for the future, what I wanted to do, surrounded by people that you want to learn from,
mm-hmm.
which is just as important, and allowed you to have some kind of lifestyle balance. Those are the factors you use.
So you got out, you did well. I mean, you did well in law school. It sounds like you kind of did well in school, period. That was one of your things that you prided yourself in. Yeah.
Yeah. I have two children that are incredibly academically successful.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't at that level, but I did fine. And I followed, I think, a fairly normal path towards academic success.
From reading, though, Charlie, when you got out of law school and you became an attorney, I don't know how fast that path was for you, but you became a very successful attorney, and it kind of veered into big deals, real estate deals. Like, what was I'm assuming you said, did you get married right out of law school?
Not right out of law school.
Okay.
I'm divorced, but I met my first wife in law school.
Yeah.
We got married. We got married several years later.
Wait, was she in law school also?
Yes.
Oh, well, there you go.
We met in law school towards the tail end. We got married later on. She's a successful, attorney today, and very highly skilled in a particular discipline of law.
Yeah.
Well respected in her area. So, that was the trajectory from day one, and there was no reason to veer off it. And I, of course, never veered off it. Yes, I got a job.
Yeah.
I worked at a firm. I moved to another firm, and I eventually made my way to a kind of a mid-sized firm where I moved up that ladder within the firm quickly, and I became a partner probably by my sixth year of practicing law.
Okay. So you were on a
very
fast
early.
path. Yeah.
Yeah, it was very early. And eventually that firm merged another firm, and we kept growing and, became partners in large, recognized national AmLaw 100 law firms. And all those years were valuable experiences for me. Valuable.
So one of the things, reading, because you can learn so much about what you sent me, and I one of the things I was taking away from that is that because you were, and this happens always when you're doing well, and the private schools and the things that happen and all the material things around you, because you're in that world. Was that a fuel for you, Charlie, or was it, because, it's funny how that works with, and I guess it would be the same as an attorney as it would be in an entrepreneur in business. There's two ways to look at wealth. One is it's a way to keep score. And the other is it's really important because you want those things. How did that work in your mind when you were getting to that point where you were in that special place where you had acquired?
Yeah, hindsight's always the most valuable education you're going to get. So you look back, and when you go through this process, you reflect and you try to see where you might have veered off the road and what events occurred that influenced you more than other events, where your priorities adjusted, decisions were made. I cannot find a specific inflection point. It is a combination of events, but what you realize is that all of the decisions that were made along the way were yours.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
You cannot attach any of those decisions to another person. There might have been influences. There might have been pressure points. But if you sit and you point the finger at anyone other than the one you see in the mirror, you are completely misguided.
Mm-hmm.
And once you own your own conduct, your own life, you can move forward and embrace the opportunities that lie ahead. If not, you're going to simply fester on yesteryear, and yesteryear has no value. You can't make money if you miss the investment in the market that occurred yesterday.
True.
So you have to just use it as a learning a learning experience, and you move forward. So I make it my business never to point the finger at anyone else. I made the decision to attach myself to a particular person or people or environment. I made the decision to go left versus right, up versus down, and I learned from them.
Yeah, and you do. I mean, that's a good point, Charlie, because you in mistakes, the one thing you want to do with mistakes is because they make you wiser. They don't define you, but they make you wiser so that you can get and evolve to your next big deal and not make that mistake. The only thing that can kill you with mistakes is making the same mistake twice. That's the one that's the killer, because that's, I think Jack Nicklaus says you can hit a bad shot on a hole, just don't make two bad shots. It really messes up the hole. But
that's correct.
But Charlie, when you got into your nightmare, it appears that there was something else going on over here, and you were the attorney and you were over here, and were you taken by surprise that you were pulled into this stuff over here?
Yeah. Without providing immense background because it's not really relevant
Yeah.
other than to say that law enforcement engages in scrutiny on everybody, and sometimes that scrutiny comes about because of your attachment to others.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the scrutiny comes about because of your own conduct. In my case, it came about because of my relationship with others. However, what I was found guilty of has nothing to do with anyone else.
Right.
Has nothing to do with anyone else. I just became the focus as a result of having attached with others whose conduct was independently evaluated, and I was asked to participate in that government inquiry, and for professional reasons, I elected not to, or I avoided it to the extent I could with advice of lawyers.
Mm-hmm.
The result was I opened up my own independent investigation, and my offenses involve money. It involves my own personal taxes and conduct around that income, and I was found guilty after trial. So it's really important to be aware of your surroundings. It's always
Mm-hmm.
important in life. If people can take anything out of this, just be mindful that it's not that you shouldn't connect with people, but just be mindful to what extent you're connecting, what role they play in your life, and how to manage that.
Mm-hmm.
And today I'm much more careful about it, not to avoid, but just to be conscious of.
Yeah, more
Because
aware.
you talked about vulnerability. Vulnerability is usually a negative connotation. It actually allows you to connect.
Mm-hmm.
To be vulnerable lets you be authentic, lets you connect with people. So if I refuse to be vulnerable, I'll simply live under a rock. I still have to take risks. I still have to expose myself, but that doesn't mean I have to be cavalier about it.
Yeah.
So the charge today is not to live under a rock and be fearful. The charge today is to manage who I am, embrace the opportunities that are in front of me, but be conscious of where those opportunities might not be as healthy as the ones that are.
Yeah. Yeah. When you went through your process, did it last a long time? Was it months, years?
Yeah. I mean, I'll give you a chronology.
Yeah.
My offense involved income, unreported income for the calendar year 2005. I was indicted in 2010, just towards the end of the statute of limitations period.
Wow, it's 5 years.
And I went to trial in 2012, 3-day trial. Jury came back in a couple 3 hours, guilty. It's a tax charge. It's a conduct charge. This is not white collar crimes are all involve subject matters that are very nuanced,
Mm-hmm.
and it's difficult to explain those nuanced subjects to a jury of your peers. It's difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Hindsight. Do you question whether you should have gone to trial? Of course you do. You would be oblivious to the world if you didn't. At the same time, I surrounded myself by highly skilled, well-respected practitioners who counseled me within the skill set they had and provided me with sufficient basis to believe that there was a defense or an inability of the government to be successful in showing beyond reasonable doubt that I was guilty of the conduct. I made that decision with them, and some of it had to do with the fact that being guilty of a felony, or whether it's by jury or whether it's by admission, would result in the immediate surrendering of my law license. It's not negotiable.
Mm-hmm.
Morally, as well as pursuant to the rules of ethics that govern lawyers. So I struggle with it over and over. If I acknowledge the guilt because of the risks that I face when going to trial, I'm giving up my law license.
Mm-hmm.
It was the first very difficult decision I made, and it opens up a conversation about being a lawyer.
Well, I was going to say, Charlie, I was thinking while you were talking about that, I almost think that the idea of the plea bargain might be tougher for an attorney who's versed in the law, lives in the law, knows the processes of the law, that I don't know if there's something down in your bones that says, I'm going to take this through the processes that I'm entitled to before I'm ready to fall on the sword. I hadn't really thought about that before, but I think that an attorney knows so much more than the business guy or the whatever he's being told, by the attorney, but that's different than being the attorney.
It's on one hand, it's true. On the other hand, the attorney is also conscious of the success rate of the government and the difficulty it is to defend yourself, especially within the federal system.
Yeah, they have a 97% win rate.
Yeah,
good.
Win.
Very good.
So you manage in your head what I was leading up to in my prior comment regarding the notion of being a lawyer is giving up my license was basically giving up my persona.
Mm-hmm.
Who I was 100% built around being an attorney.
Well, the other thing, but Charlie, the other thing that because I want to get this in there, you're going to trial. You went to trial. That whole idea, was your family in that decision with you, that Dad, what are you doing? Husband, what are you doing? Did you talk about it with them, or was it really actually Charlie saying with his attorneys, this is my best move, or was it a family thing?
At the time, I'm disappointed to admit, and I've admitted this many times since, but I'm disappointed to say again publicly that it was a completely selfish decision. I did not sufficiently include the critical people in my life who were going to be impacted by my decisions to a magnitude that might be in excess of my own.
Yeah.
Okay? And I didn't. And those are struggles that I had to work through.
How old would they have been?
And I worked through them every day.
The two kids. How old would the kids have been?
Yeah, my children at the time, my daughter was going into college and my son was in medical school.
So young adults.
Yeah, young adults. Yeah. Smart, on a very good road, clear paths. But I had to work through that. So
what was their feedback to you?
Well, there was a lot of tension. I was divorced. I was, entering into another relationship at the lowest point of my life, which is further evidence that
it's not uncommon though, Charlie.
It might not be uncommon.
Yeah.
It is poisonous.
Sure.
Because all you're doing is adding, burdens that are of no value.
Yeah.
And there's just further evidence that you've made bad decisions. Yeah. You've made decisions that have impacted yourself that are misguided.
Mm-hmm.
Just, stipulated. We can move past that. So for me, giving up my law license was giving up who I was.
Yeah.
I would basically crawl into a rock, and there's no reason for me to exist. I woke up in the morning. I went to work. I put my suit on. Yeah. I wanted to do good. I wanted to represent my clients. I was a transactional lawyer. I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
I loved the energy that came from it. I enjoyed the exchange with my colleagues. I enjoyed the exchange with the other side. I think I had a very good reputation. I can't say that I was the smartest, the brightest bulb, but I had the ability to surround myself by very, very smart people. And what what I knew then is what I know now, and that is that I know what I don't know more than I know what I know. So I always surrounded myself by good people.
Yeah, and I think
when
that's
it came
smart.
to my professionals, I didn't necessarily surround myself with the right people as clients and as in my personal life, and that's where I fell off. I fell off the rails, made bad choices that led.
Did you feel like you were falling off the rails, or was it a surprise to you that, oh my God, I can't believe I'm here. I can't believe I found myself in this position?
Well, the number of neon signs could have lit up, Broadway without any doubt.
Looking back on it.
That
right.
said, I didn't, okay, they're neon signs.
Right.
Big deal. I'm me, and it, you get this superpower, almost this super optimism that I'm invincible, or this is just so small, no one really cares. And in my case, there were financial pressures, self-imposed. I'm not pointing the finger at anyone else. And those self-imposed pressures caused me to engage in conduct that I could have mitigated.
Yeah.
The amount in controversy in my case
was a small amount.
Less than I made in a year.
Yeah.
So these were just foolish decisions that I had the skills to mitigate, to eliminate, to avoid, but I made bad choices, and I paid the price.
Well,
but worse than my price was the price that everyone around me paid.
Oh yeah, no, everybody.
Which is one thing people tend to ignore.
No, and I think that's one of the things that the more that we all talk together, there's a similarity of the fact that if somebody does have a family, that the family also goes to prison in their own way, and they have to survive in their own way. The one person actually goes to prison, and then everybody else feels and is a part of that prison sentence, and they have to survive in their world. And hopefully, if you have a family that can lean on each other, they can help each other out. But it's a tough thing for families to go through and survive it. For sure. And I think once you get through it and you actually make it through it, there is a sense within the family that, wow, we survived. And it's a weird thing. You can't really talk about that a lot because it sounds strange. We survived prison, but it is a feeling of, thank God we survived, because a lot of times it doesn't.
You're 100% right. I don't embrace the philosophy that I'm grateful I went to prison. No. I do not buy that. It is misguided. If somebody wants to believe it, good for them. But for me, whatever road I ended up traveling, I had to figure out how to traverse.
Yeah.
I'm not happy I went to prison.
No.
That would be so disingenuous.
No, because it takes your reputation. It's a disappointment. It's your pride, all that stuff that you have to deal with.
Correct.
But Charlie, one of the things I do want to talk about, though, is that you went to trial and then you got the sentence. And a lot of times what happens is that you walk out of that courtroom, you wait for the letter in the mail, and then it tells you where to go and you show up. That's you voluntarily surrender. That didn't happen with you. And was that a surprise to you that what happened is that you immediately went into custody?
Yes. It was a total shock. I don't really question the judge's decision because it doesn't serve me any purpose at all.
But as far as what was going through your mind, you were sentenced, and then you immediately, while you're going through, oh my gosh, I just lost this case, and the jury's, and then most of the time you're going to walk out of there, and in this case you didn't, and you went to probably the county jail.
Yes. Well, no, in my case it was a little bit more dramatic. So I practice law. to the night before I was sentenced. I surrendered my law license by executing paperwork in advance, but it took place about 2 weeks after I was taken into custody at sentencing. But I was still practicing law and enjoying it, and it was part of who I was. But I was contemplated and properly executed documents with the advice of an ethics lawyer to properly surrender my license and wind down my practice. And I took the time between the jury's verdict and the sentencing date to put in place what I needed to do. Sure, the notion of being remanded was presented to me, but it was so de minimis in likelihood that I didn't give it a lot of thought. But I left a lot undone. Mm-hmm. So I was remanded. The reasons, are left to the judge, and that's not an appealable issue at the moment. At least it wasn't. And in the federal system, if you're in a large city, you're taken into a detention center, which is basically a maximum security prison, not with any open air. Mm-hmm. And the population is a diverse group of people who are charged pending, who are found guilty pending designation, or in transit between facilities or there for hearings or other trials. Even though you're in prison, you can be a witness in another case, and you can be brought in. So the population is basically filled with people who have been accused or found guilty of every single federal offense known. And without regard to offense levels, which is how you get designated between the federal prison camp to the supermax based upon the conduct. Right. So you're basically thrown in that, and it's a very restricted, controlling, an environment that is not even what you would see on television, because the government they're holding you, and they don't have the time to simply segregate everybody. And it's because it's temporary, but temporary can last. Yeah. I've met guys who were in there for 5 and 6 years. There's somebody who is one of 300 defendants and they're cooperating. They're not going to be sentenced until all 299 are sentenced. So they're sitting there for years.
Good Lord.
And I went from one detention facility to another. Of course, you go by bus.
It's not good to travel as a prisoner.
No, you get chained and shackled, and I went to another one, and I waited there until designation. Designation while you're in custody doesn't mean that you will get transferred. So even though you know where you're going, the transfer window could take weeks or months based upon availability of space on a bus, timing of the bus schedule, where they are going, there are all kinds of factors. And last but not least, the bed, the bunk where you're going. If there's no bunks, they can't take you in. So you sit there. So I waited probably around 5 total months between 2 federal detention facilities. And you make the best of it. You get a job, you try to keep yourself occupied, but it is true incarceration.
It's hell.
Yeah. And having never been there before, you learn from the population. You learn to listen, but accept only that which you've heard. Till you see it yourself, you don't necessarily agree with everybody. And eventually I made my way to a prison camp, and
which was probably a welcome relief at that point.
Oh, I mean, the day I was transferred, it was transferred late on a Friday. We arrived, we went into the to the main facility, which is a medium. And then the officer said, "Okay, you can just walk outside and go up the hill, and you go to the camp." And I said, "What do you mean walk outside?" So yeah, just you don't need us. You
No, just go do your thing.
Because the federal system has levels, and there's a certain inherent trust that's given at various levels. So I got to prison, and I don't talk about it a lot anymore because it's been many years.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what I did in prison that was the most important for me was establishing the routine, which included a 9-to-5 job.
Yep. Totally agree with you, Charlie. And I think you and I actually did the same job. We were both in the warehouse clerks.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it was physical, moving all the food and I actually, learned, I got forklift certified. So I felt like I was doing something to I would have never have gotten forklift certified, but it certainly did eat up time. And I think what you just said is one of the most important things, because there's only two types of people in prison, the ones that have given up and the ones that are trying to make it work. And I think by having a legitimate job that eats up time makes you feel more like yourself.
Spot on. You think about it, my life outside routine was getting up, going to work, and being off on weekends in theory. As a lawyer, of course, weekends are very limited, but your personal life, because you have to work. But that was my routine. It was very important. It was also important to have responsibility and to be recognized to have responsibility. And, I was surrounded by some guys that I respected, and I followed their lead. And as they thankfully left, I moved up the ranks, and I basically, had a desk with a typewriter, no computers, and I moved up to the paperwork level and had decision-making responsibility, which allowed me to see that things ran as smoothly as they could for the benefit of the folks that I was incarcerated with.
Sure.
Because delivering food to them. And then eventually I actually got a step up, and I was designated as the facility driver.
Yeah.
And
so you left the campus
all the time.
Yeah.
I drove. I would get basically a furlough, a day pass with instructions, and they would give me a cell phone and a GPS, actually, if I wanted it. Back in those days, they were separate. And I go to the pool, the vehicle pool, and I could drive to the Home Depot, to the CVS. I could drive to the hospital to take somebody. I went to the airport. I went to pick up in a truck loads of food and waited. I drove officers around.
Yeah.
So I had a interesting experience, and I was driving on the highway.
But you had earned that, which is part of that mental thing too. They were allowing you to take that job, and basically a trust mechanisms in there that you're not leaving and not coming back. You're actually going to perform your task and come back to prison. Yeah. Yeah.
Look, there are a lot of restrictions, and you break the rules, you're done.
Yeah.
So, and I, being a rule follower, they weren't difficult.
Yeah.
I honored them, and I spent my time efficiently. I worked. So my weekends were very distinct from my weekday. Very distinct.
Yes. Well, and I'm trying to remember the amount of time that you were given. Was it 4?
I got 70 months.
70 months.
I got 70 months, which is the top of I got enhanced twice.
Yeah, they thought a lot of you, Charlie, to give you 70 months. Jeez.
I spent no time evaluating the propriety of the court's decision. It is.
Oh yeah, I know.
Move forward. I've accepted it, and so I went to work. I lived my life. I moved from one facility, getting a furlough, and I flew down to Florida and transferred to another facility.
Yeah.
And I went into the RDAP program, and I got a job inside the RDAP program, basically with an office. I had an office and a desk. Literally, I had an office and a desk in a building, and I did paperwork, and again, I felt complete
Mm-hmm.
in the sense that I had purpose. I left RDEP and I left to go to a halfway house,
I
which,
think it's
as
always
all of your listeners say, is materially worse than the prison environment because it's an unregulated facility. It doesn't have the organization of the BOP.
totally agree.
And you can bitch and complain about the BOP all you want, but there are rules and they have to follow them, and there's some level of accountability inside of the halfway house system. It is ad hoc field day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So and everybody around you is a mixed population.
Mm-hmm.
There's
All custody levels.
There's no right, and most of the folks, given the fact that there's this 60-something% recidivism rate out there,
Mm-hmm.
most of the folks are just reorganizing for their next bid.
Yeah.
So you where you don't want to remember that.
Right.
Other guys, it's a badge of honor to go through the system.
So when you were getting out, you started thinking about getting out. I think it's that kind of weird time period where you've been in this world, primitive world. You're doing your thing. You're on your routine. What was your thoughts about getting out when you started getting close to the door, knowing that your time was getting close?
I had some personal hurdles that I had to get over without boring the audience. Basically, I was married just before I was incarcerated, and as I was leaving, having changed my release jurisdiction from one city to another based on where my then wife wanted to reside, she advised me that she was filing for divorce concurrent with my date of departure, my date of release. So I was forced not only in the halfway house, but also to be there for an extended period because
you didn't have a home plan.
Right.
Yeah.
And the home that I was going to, although approved, was no longer available to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to do my own little reorganization. It took its time and toll.
Mm-hmm.
But I had already been through a twisted road that had serious rocks and boulders, both and weather conditions that were just beyond imaginable.
Well, don't you think though, Charlie, that's one of the things that you walk away with is that when you're presented something, because of what you've gone through, that you absolutely know more than you did before that I can adapt to this and I can probably step through it, even though it's going to taste so bad or whatever it's going to take. There's a feeling that after going through what you've been through, I don't like it. I'm going to have to do this, but you know what? I probably can.
Well, you definitely get a sense of confidence, not conceit, confidence that you can survive, that you will survive.
Yeah.
Time is the ultimate healer, and that's kind of a cliche, but it's not, because it does allow things to get repositioned in your head and adjust your priorities. So I confronted it, I dealt with it, and it's not easy.
No.
It's not easy to deal with now the past, because remember, when you go through a process when you're young, you don't have any history. You're pure. I think we talked before we started about the notion of when you graduate law school and you apply for your law license, it's all academic.
That's right.
At 25, there's very little behavioral history that's problematic.
Right. You're getting ready to start your record. Right.
Right. Well, in your 50s and your 60s, there is
a lot of different
5 decades worth of behavioral conduct. some of which, in my case, included a felony, and that's not so easy.
Right.
So you have to deal with that, and it does give you not a superpower, but it does get you to be humble about the fact that this is just another hurdle that you need to confront. It might not be as easy as the prior one, and it might take longer, but
well, and I want to talk about those steps you took, because you actually did quite a few things, and one of them being the peer-to-peer mentoring. When you were thinking about that, Charlie, how long had you been out before that became real, actually in place?
So I was out about 3 years.
Okay.
2.5, 3 years. When I got out, I waited a couple of years and got my sense of stability.
Yeah,
got
your sea legs back.
Yeah, got an apartment.
Yeah.
Felt stable in the sense that I could have a place to sleep. There wasn't people scrutinizing my behavior. But I was still on federal probation. And probation really, for the audience, probation's purpose is not to police you. It's really to support you. And if you feel like they're policing you, you're missing the mark. Because I found it to be non-problematic. If you approach it with a positive attitude, it's
my
really
only problem with it
than,
was I just wanted to be done. It's like you get out of prison, you just want to shake it all off. You want all of it to be done, and you're like, damn, they're still with me. They're still right here. I'm still doing this monthly thing, and I'm doing this, and I'm doing that. That was the thing I had. I didn't really talk about it much, Charlie, because it was more like, poor me. But that was what was rolling in my head. It was when I finally got off of that probation, I was like, okay, I feel different.
There's no doubt, but you earn it. And also, to some degree, and I know I don't want to sound like an advocate for incarceration, because I'm not, obviously, but its purpose is also to provide steps, allows you to evolve, which is one of my favorite words.
Evolve.
Evolve is not an overnight thing.
No,
it's part of your evolution, because you need to gradually adapt to the next environment. And if there wasn't some way of providing a check and balance, you could go off to the right or left and drop. And you need a parachute.
Sure.
So I took advantage of it that way. I didn't allow it to be a burden on me, and it was fairly matter of fact. But so on the peer-to-peer side, what happened is I contacted an attorney regarding the steps to be readmitted to the bar. And I knew that I needed to take a long and hard look about myself and about all the things that I needed to meet those criteria.
Did your kids know you were going to do this?
I didn't share it with many people at all. I was introduced to somebody at the federal probation who had as part of his mission an intention to help folks who really needed guidance that the federal officers themselves really couldn't give. So the concept of the peer-to-peer was simply this. Rather than feeling restrained or held back by talking to somebody with an official title, perhaps people will be more open and feel more comfortable in exchanging with their true peers. So we presented this concept to probation. We integrated it with what is known as the reentry court, which is a court within the federal.
I didn't even know there was such a thing until I was reading your paperwork.
Yeah, and it's usually for folks that have been incarcerated for some period of time,
Mm-hmm.
not white collar offenders generally, but they come out and if they do good, and I use that term, if they really do well and they stay focused and they're there to help, they're to help them find the job, they're help them maybe get a particular certificate, secure some financial assistance, and the government assists you. They subsidize things. One guy in particular, wanted to get his commercial driver's license. Then he needed commercial insurance, and they were willing to work with him to accomplish that. Impressive for me.
Yeah.
So we made a presentation to the Eastern District and the judges who support this court. They embraced it, and we provided a forum where folks who were leaving the system, who were dealing with struggles, both state and federal, could join in a meeting and share. And we set up some guidelines and some rules, so we had some structure. We established confidentiality, and for quite a long period, several years, it was flourishing.
Well, I think you had like over 250 people or whatever in this program.
Right? I don't think it was in the full reentry court. Yes,
maybe that was the full number. Okay,
right. But we didn't have that many, and it was floating every week.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, if one person derived a net gain, it was successful.
Yeah.
So
for the most part, it filled you up in the fact that you felt like you were making an impact or a difference.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
When I got out, I also made it my business to try to volunteer. Look, I'm lucky. I had a family to provide some level of emotional support.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have a lot of financial support, although my family would step up when I needed.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that some of the nonprofits, I'm going to make a little negative statement. The nonprofits were not really willing to take on someone like me as a volunteer. I was not well received, and I had tried to reach out to many dozens, and it just wasn't happening.
That's interesting because I would think in your capacity, Charlie, with your background and having a legal background, that you would be someone that they would almost seek out in a nonprofit.
Yeah, and maybe I didn't go about it the right way, but I was not. I wasn't well received initially, and but I did take the time to add myself on the roster of a few organizations and did some good, and I felt positive. And when this came about, it was an additional step. And
how long did that stay in play, the peer-to-peer?
Several years, all through COVID. We did it through Zoom through COVID. Look, it's peer-to-peer, so I got out of as much as I put in it.
Sure.
It wasn't always about them. It was about me.
Absolutely.
And you feel part of a group. It's kind
of like the Jeff Grant thing that you and I are part of.
Correct. Yeah.
You come in there every Monday night because you feel like you're a part of that, and we have a unique situation that we've all gone through. Obviously, we all have different paths of how we got there, but we have a uniqueness of being in that, all of us in the same world, and I think that's what draws everybody together.
Yeah. It was part of my rehabilitation.
Mm-hmm.
There's no doubt about it.
Mm-hmm.
It was part of it. Without any certificate, it was just part of me completing the steps I needed to evolve.
But Charlie, did you know? I know you talked to the attorney and he talked about the steps and how hard it was going to be, and reading that, gosh, what is it, 80-page document or whatever it is for that motion, did you know that it was going to be that deep of a dive to make it happen?
Well, look, I'm grateful I hired a bona fide expert attorney, and had immense confidence in her ability.
Mm-hmm.
And she was clear with me about the complexity of it. But look, I'm having been a lawyer and now one again. I didn't take it casually.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that I always was proud of was the fact that I was really grateful for the opportunity to practice law.
Yeah.
It wasn't something that I earned it. And I was grateful that I had the
ability
to practice.
You liked what you were doing.
And I loved it.
Yeah.
I loved it. I absolutely loved it. But there was always, I didn't take it for granted.
Mm-hmm.
So I approached the readmission process with the same integrity. Whether the board and the Supreme Court had that as part of its criteria, and decision making wasn't relevant to me. What it was relevant for me is that if I'm going to get this back, it's because I want it.
Yeah.
And I've earned it, and I've benefited along the way to confirm in my mind that I'm proud to be an attorney.
Yeah.
So I did, and I went down the path very carefully,
mm-hmm.
very methodically,
mm-hmm.
very slowly.
Oh, I can tell that by reading through this whole.
And
it's like a book.
It's about a 3 to 4 year process from the initial thinking. It is gut wrenching personally.
Yeah. Well, Charlie, what did you feel like though? Once, I mean, I'm reading that and it's, you first read it, it says it's granted, then you read through the whole thing. What in the world went through your mind that you put all this work in and this motion comes back and it's granted? Like, what's the feeling of that?
Yeah. It's, look, one of the criteria of being reinstated is that there is a confirmation of your rehabilitation.
Yes.
One of the blessings that I have, unlike others, is that I have a formal judicial body has confirmed
that you're rehabilitated.
That there is sufficient evidence to support my rehabilitation. That is immense.
Do you think that we should have something like that overall?
I don't know. I do know that it's not casually given.
Yeah.
It is a very carefully evaluated application. The people that review it take it really seriously. There is law about it, and it's every jurisdiction is differently.
I'm just wondering, if you think about one of the biggest things that I see for reentry is the idea that you have to check the box if you're looking for a job, or you have to check the box if you're trying to rent a place to live. But if there was maybe a process that you earned, that you are handed and said you are deemed rehabilitated, so you no longer have to, you're exempt. Maybe there's something around in that realm, because I don't think that things are going to get to a certain point until we get to the point where we're not absolutely crucifying people through reentry, taking away most of their opportunities to get to a house or a job.
It's a very interesting subject. For the felon to move forward their life, they do need chances to succeed. And chances to succeed requires interaction with other people. And if other people are hesitant to interact, those chances go down.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point. Great point.
Correct. You are correct when you present the notion that a certificate of rehabilitation might open doors.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you would do it. I haven't given it any thought. And I'm not suggesting that getting my law.
It's really the first time I was thinking about it, though, to tell you the truth.
And I've reflected on the fact that having the privilege to practice law again, both both from the notion of a man who has been deprived by his own conduct.
Mm-hmm.
I deprived myself of it, to a notion of somebody that's earned it back. I have achieved my own self-recognition of rehabilitation.
Exactly, which is a huge thing.
It's great, and I'm grateful that the Supreme Court confirmed it. I felt confident and comfortable that I had achieved it, and it's great to have somebody, a judicial governmental body to affirm it. I have the same license that I had when I was disbarred. Well, my license status hasn't changed, but I have changed.
Yes. Well,
so I have the same rights and privileges. But
I mean, your kids have to be so proud, though, Charlie, right?
Yeah, we don't really talk about it a lot.
I mean, I would think, because you're back in you did it. You put yourself back and had to go through and swim through the ugly mud water and get to where you wanted to go, which I think you should be very proud, because a lot of people say they want to do that. I've talked to people who've lost their law license. My dad was one of them. He never got his law license again, and he graduated #1 in his class. So in law school. So there is a thing that you have to get through to say, I'm going to do this, because, you're putting yourself out there, and you put yourself out there, and it works. But Charlie, on saying all that, because you're very articulate in how you walk people through your story, but what do you think's your biggest takeaway through everything that you've been through?
So there's no doubt that the process is debilitating.
Yeah.
It is draining.
Yeah.
But the takeaway for me really rests on the fact that I've taken advantage of it for my net gain. And that's really the abstract concept. The specifics is I'm far more authentic today than I was.
Mm.
And because I have the authenticity of owning the events that took place, because if you don't own what happened, you're going nowhere.
Right.
Let's just stop right there.
Great point.
Denial has no role in this process.
No, it stunts growth. Yeah.
100%. So once you own it, I began to realize that I can move forward,
mm-hmm.
that I can charge myself with the responsibility of being a good corporate citizen.
Mm-hmm.
I can restore myself to the roles of a professional, and I can provide bona fides to my family and friends that we can overcome. These are not planned events. Mm-hmm. I didn't plan on this happening, but I caused it to happen. So I believe I have bona fides to establish that we can overcome. It's not just my fact pattern, but life events.
Yeah.
Life events. And those are the things that I take away today. And I hope others, find that same purpose.
No,
it doesn't have to be incarceration. It could be any.
That's why I think that's a good takeaway. Yeah, that you can overcome.
Well, and it's. I know it's abstract, but when you succeed in that sense, as your podcast caption says, nightmare success. Mm-hmm. You derive positivity from these negative events. And that positivity, keeps you going. It keeps you moving forward. You can't dwell on the past. And I have become this, I'm not saying I'm metaphysical, but I'm much more aware. So I realize the past is merely experiential.
Right.
The future is conceptual.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea. But the present is already gone. The conversation we just had is already the past.
Done.
So I'm really trying to
record it.
Yeah, yeah. But I'm nurturing myself in the moment.
Exactly.
In the moment.
Exactly.
And don't deprive yourself of the moment. A couple little tidbits. I write every day.
Yep.
It could be a word or a phrase or some lengthy thing. I believe that journaling has a powerful message for yourself. If you're struggling with something and you journal, the journal now owns the struggle. You don't have you've given it to somebody else.
That's a good tip.
And so
I like that. That's a good. I mean, that's a great reason for someone to understand why you'd want to journal. I think that's like writing a book. I wrote every day until I was done. It took a while. It took about a year, but it was therapeutic. I can tell you that. It was definitely therapeutic for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. Mental health is equally as important as physical health.
Yeah.
We shouldn't diminish the importance of mental health. And probably last but not least is do not take anything for granted.
Oh, and that's so true, especially when you go through an event. I was saying the other day, and I'm repeating what I said on one of the last podcasts, though, is that you find moments and times where you think, oh my gosh, I'm just so glad I'm here. I'm just so glad I'm here. Because, there's times in those time periods when you get a 60-month sentence or a 70-month sentence, you're not there. I think about Thanksgiving that's coming up and Christmas is coming up. And those are the worst times that you could ever have in prison because because of what's on the calendar that you're removed from the events of life going on the outside. So, Charlie, I think if people want to get a hold of you for whatever the case may be, but you are an attorney also. How do they get a hold of you?
Well, I have my firm is CMN Advisors, so they can email me if they want.
Okay.
And just go on the web at www.cmnadvisors.com. So the world is opportunistic. And it doesn't cost anything. By the way, just so everyone knows, happiness is free. It's totally free. It doesn't cost anything.
You don't have to buy that. That's true.
I've never seen anyone try to charge for happiness. Because it's free.
That's a great point.
True happiness is free because only you can make yourself happy.
So true.
The environment around you might help, but you decided to be happy just as much as you decided to be angry. So I'm taking advantage of what's free, and I'm trying to be in the moment and happy and avoid regret. The last thing I would say is just avoid regret. It is debilitating and you're incapable of moving forward. So
that's a great place to end it. I love that. You summed it up right to the end there, Charlie. Good stuff. I love your story. It's it's got all those pieces to it, but then at the end, you had to make the decision to just grit it out and really get back to what you really wanted to do, because I see that as being part of your identity in a good way. That you've earned it the first time, you lost it, you earned it back, but you had to fight harder for it. And the identity even means that more to you now. And I love that. I love that part of the story. I think that's a big part of your story, and I love it.
Thank you.
For anybody who wants to get a hold of me, just go to brentcassidy.com. I love all the messages. We can message there back and forth on that website. And you guys you don't know how much I love you guys leaving reviews on Apple. That's been a big surge here lately, and it really helps the show. I think it's one of the things that helped to move it up to the 1.5% on in the global ranking. And I want to thank everybody for the listens, the follows, the shares. If you got anything out of this show today, share it to whoever you own. It helps grow the show, and it helps people. As I used to say when I was writing my emails back and forth from prison, stay strong. I'll do the same. Charlie, thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Nightmare Success, in and out.